Absolutely. I can go ahead and get started with some introductions for our speakers today. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Tim Decora, Miss Amanda or Mandy Depagter, and then Mr. Bill Quackenbush as well. Our first speaker is going to be Mr. Decora. So Tim Decora is a physical education teacher and coach at Wanakee High School. He's also an enrolled member of the Ho-Chunk Nation. Mr. Decora earned his degrees from the University of Wisconsin-Platteville, where he played basketball. He's working towards his master's degree in educational administration. Mr. Decora has also been very involved in his local community and has spent a ton of time with students in Dr. Conaway's capstone for ecology and conservation with the Native Nations of Wisconsin. Ms. Depagter is the Director of Facilities and Services for Dane County Facilities Management. Ms. Depagter has been working with Mr. Quackenbush on the development of Ho-Chunk demonstration sites and cultural learning opportunities at the McCarthy Youth and Conservation Park. These sites are used for community education and engagement, and Ms. Depagter shares that Mr. Quackenbush has been instrumental in sharing knowledge with the local community. And Mr. Quackenbush is a Ho-Chunk Deer Clan member and serves as the Ho-Chunk Tribal Historic Preservation Officer and Cultural Resources Division Manager. Mr. Quackenbush began working for the Ho-Chunk Nation in 1999 as a land specialist in the Heritage Preservation Department. In 2006, Mr. Quackenbush became the Ho-Chunk Nation's Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, and in 2008, Mr. Quackenbush became the Ho-Chunk Nation Cultural Resources Division Manager. In addition to these positions, Mr. Quackenbush has held seats on the Kickapoo Valley Reserve Board, the Mississippi Valley Archaeological Center Board, the Wisconsin Intertribal Repatriations Committee, the Nation Association of Tribal Historic Preservation Officers, the Fox Wisconsin Heritage Parkway Board, the Sauk County FSA Committee, and the Intertribal Bison Cooperative. Through his work, Mr. Quackenbush receives advice and guidance from the Ho-Chunk Nation Heritage Preservation Board, the Ho-Chunk Nation Traditional Courts, and the Ho-Chunk Deer Clan Elders. Now that I've introduced our speakers, it is my pleasure to hand things over to Mr. Decora.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to see some familiar names pop up on the screen tonight. I hope to get you to think a little bit, a couple things. I'm going to start out with my talk, and I'll end kind of in a similar fashion. That I can share my screen now, correct, Megan?
You should be able to share it. Yep. Let me know if you can. It on the bottom there is an option.
Or Courtney. Okay. Where are we? Let me just check to see if I can find it. All right, here we go. So the probably close to a dozen times that I've done this type of speaking engagement, I've really kind of talked about myself a little bit, and since I did it the first couple times, I wanted to try to tie something in that I think is very, very important. First of all, again, I'm a member of the Ho-Chunk Nation, Ho-Chunk tribe, if you want to call it. I know Mr. Quackenbush said he's from the Deer Clan. I'm from the Bear Clan, patrolling the grounds, so to speak. And I wanted to talk about growing up as a Ho-Chunk youngster, Native member, going to school and going to college a little bit, and share some of my background, especially those of you that chimed in from the community. If you don't know who I am, you'll kind of get a little full dose of it. So I'll get started here. The big thing I wanted to talk about, and again, I will end with this, is being a role model, a mentor, a friend, adult confidant, in really any young person's lives. I put down a little quote here. I said, you can play a significant role in someone's life, especially in the life of a minority student, underprivileged student, special needs student, economically. I mean, there's probably a long list of young people, students that I run through or I have run through throughout the course of my teaching career. And I've had a number of them come back um, and chat with me, see me 5, 10 years later after they get out of high school, and just kind of talk about some of the things that either I encouraged them to do, gave them some advice, said, think about this. And it's really cool. I've been able to have that feeling of helping somebody along in some way, shape, or form. And all of you adults here, and I don't know if we have any any high schoolers or any students here in here. I know we've got college students in here, but you can play such a huge role in a young person's life, especially if you're in a field where you work with young people. That it just goes beyond what you think. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the people that impacted my life, and certainly a lot of the things that you're going to see in my growing up and through my college and professional career just wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't be speaking to you right now if I didn't have somebody to lean on, somebody who believed in me, somebody who gave me some advice, somebody who took the time out of their life to be a part of mine. And it's really a blessing that I've had some of the people in my life. So I kind of want to go through that, and I'll try to touch on that as much as I can, because like I said, if I didn't have these people in my life, I just wouldn't be here today talking with you. I may not, who knows, I may not even be alive, but I'm here, and I'm darn glad I am. So I'm going to kind of give you just a quick synopsis. I was born and raised in the Wisconsin Dells area. Very large number of Ho-Chunk people in that particular area. I believe when I was going through school, there were a dozen or more Ho-Chunk students in my grade that I grew up with. I went through grade school, junior high, and high school. I was fortunate enough to be of those dozen, probably 5 or 6 that actually made it through high school. Some of those other friends of mine that I grew up playing with and going to school with and hanging out with, didn't quite make it. So I was born at St. Clair Hospital up in Baraboo, Wisconsin, and I was raised by basically my family. I had 2 really young parents when I grew up, or when I was born. My mom was 18 and my dad was 17. And as a 52-year-old person, and again, probably older, that was kind of a little bit of a common thing. It's probably a little rare now, but it commonly occurred with 2 young parents. I was basically raised by my relatives on my mother's side of the family. So I spent a great deal of time with my great grandmother. She probably cared for me through at least the first 4 or 5 years of my life. And that was just kind of one of those things that being a child of 2 young parents, I know what I was thinking about doing. And when I was 18 and 17 years old, and then growing 19 and 20, it probably wasn't really raising a child. It was still living the life of a young person. So that's where my great grandmother came in, and she really, it's kind of a funny story with growing up Ho-Chunk, is that she would talk to me in Ho-Chunk and say, go turn off the lights, or go open the door, or go see who's at the door, in the Ho-Chunk language. And my couple of my younger aunts, they were just miffed, amazed that I was able to understand my great grandmother and do all of those things. And now I have some words, I use some words on occasion, but I kind of miss not being able to have that thick, Ho-Chunk language in my repertoire. But I'm kind of gravitating back towards that. Okay. I was also raised by a community, the Dells. I happened to be fortunate enough to be a high school athlete, and then certainly an athlete growing up. And a lot of the teachers and a lot of former athletes would spend a great deal of time talking with me, about my future. Teachers took an interest because I had two uncles that had come through. My two uncles, Uncle Gary and Uncle Byron, were 6 and 7 years older than I was, and they were very good students. They were very good athletes, and a lot of the teachers would ask me, "Are you going to be as good as them?" And I would always just throw it out there that I was going to be better than them. So a lot of the teachers and some of the former athletes and coaches really uh, uh, invested some time with me, talking to me, asking questions, and always getting me to think about kind of the future. I love that. I love school. My grades probably wouldn't reflect that, but I absolutely love school. I love my teachers, love my coaches, loved athletics. I just loved being a part of something. I didn't have a real. I mean, I didn't have a real strong family connection with my parents. Probably more so with my mom. Uh, so my family became the people that I became involved with: teachers, coaches, former athletes, and they kind of became my role models. Some of them probably looked at that job as, well, and maybe I'll be a parent, a father figure or mother figure to Tim growing up, and it really helped. So I'll kind of touch on that a little bit. I'll touch on the high school years. I always remember my mom saying, and I used to hear her say it all the time. She'd say, "Your high school years are the best days of your life," and I would have to agree. You didn't really have to pay for anything. You usually got some money here on the side or whatever to do things, and I'd have to agree with her. I've said that a few times to my classes over the years, that these are the best days of your life. So enjoy them while you're in them. I'll talk a little bit about my time with the Tommy Bartlett Ski, Sky, and Stage Show. I know some of you are probably familiar with that place. Unfortunately, it's not anymore. I think they're trying to sell that area, but I grew up working there. I think it was 6 or 7 years. There's a gentleman by the name of Tom Deal. He was the president, and his family kind of took me in. And provided some things that my parents couldn't provide me, or my family couldn't provide me. My best friend growing up in high school was Tom's son, Jeff. He was a year younger than me. He was a teammate of mine. I would consider the Deals family, and especially Jeff was like a brother to me, and not only a teammate, but also a brother, because we did a lot of things outside of athletics that really kind of paved the way. And I think he was the salutatorian of his high school graduate, the '88 graduating class. So he was really smart. And I always wanted to kind of be like him in the classroom. After high school, I attended UW-Platteville. I majored in physical education and health, and I played on the men's basketball team. Ironically, I went there to play football. Most of you in the Madison area probably know who Paul Christ is. He's the head football coach of our beloved Badger football team. I actually got recruited to go to Platteville by Paul's dad, George Christ, and absolutely loved that man. He was just, firm and good. And he said, "We want you, Tim." And I said, "Well, I'm coming to play football for you," because he invested some time, showed some passion and emotion for me. And I said, "I'm playing for that guy." About 3 months later, I decided, well, maybe let me talk to the basketball coach. And the basketball coach was Bo Ryan at the time. He was in I want to say his third year of coaching. And those of you, again, familiar with Badger basketball, Bo Ryan used to be the head coach for the Badgers. Well, he started at UW-Platteville, and he was just a slight better salesman than Coach Christ, because I ended up playing basketball instead of football. It was an awesome time. So we'll talk a little bit about that. My teaching and coaching career started in a small town of 180 high school students, Hillsborough High School. So if you drive west, I guess a little bit, northwest, you get to Reedsburg, and then just on the other side of Reedsburg, again going further west about 20 minutes, is Hillsborough. Absolutely loved my time there. 3 years I taught there and was a coach, and really fell in love with that place. If there's any place that I'd probably go back to other than Wisconsin Dells, I would probably go back to Hillsborough. Really love the kids there, hardworking. Again, some of them were some of those people I had referenced earlier, young adults that underprivileged, either academically, financially, special needs students. And I really loved my time there. I came to Wanakee in I think it was 96, 97, 95, 96 school year. And I'll be finishing my 26th year here, 29th in Wanakee. And I couldn't have come to a better place, both professionally and certainly academically. For my three kids, it was a blessing coming here. I hope some of the staff members that are in the call here, I hope they don't take this the wrong way, but I had a number of high school, and I came here to coach basketball. A number of basketball coaches said, I said, "What do you think? Wanakee, should I go?" And I said, I had several people say, "No, don't go, don't go." I said, "Well, I got good athletes. Don't go, don't go." And I went against their better judgment, and it's been a great place for me professionally, and like I said, it's been a great place for my kids academically and athletically as well. So let me keep zipping through here. Okay, born and raised Baraboo, Wisconsin, by some young parents. Up in the upper right or up center is St. Clair Hospital. I could probably tell you I was in the third window in. The other side of the entrance is where I was for my tonsils, getting my tonsils out. Up in the upper right-hand corner is me. I'm a big chili guy. I love that picture of me. I'm sitting in a high chair, so I got to be probably 3 or 4 years old. But I've been eating chili ever since. I can eat it for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I spent a lot of time down the middle picture. There is the Stand Rock Indian Ceremonial. I don't know the number of years that's been closed, but that was really a highlight of the boat tours, the Upper Dells. If you took the Upper Dells up river, the ending spot, the turnaround spot for the boats was the Indian ceremonial. And they would show you during the day the amphitheater where they performed dances and other things. And then if you took the boat ride up at night, they took you to the Indian ceremonial. You had tickets for the boat ride, you had tickets for the show, and you would again just sit there and it was I think it was a 90-minute show, and it was awesome. My mom danced at the show. My uncles, Byron and Gary, who I'd mentioned, Uncle Gary or Uncle Roger, excuse me, all danced and performed at the Indian ceremonial. And then everybody would get on the boat, and then the boat would take you back to the Dells. So it was really an awesome place to grow up. If you look in the bottom right-hand corner, that's Stand Rock. So it was a Stand Rock Indian ceremonial, and that's kind of an iconic picture for the Dells. I don't know how far it is. I've been up there before, and that gap, it doesn't look that big, and it doesn't look that scary. Matter of fact, I think I hopped across there as a 7 or 8 year old, and it was not a very far jump. Again, I was raised by relatives on my mother's side of the family. One of the things that happened as I was growing up is my sophomore year. Again, I would say that I grew up happy in my family, but there were some things that we just didn't have. Like a lot of the kids that I grew up with, we were a little slim on money, and we didn't have a car my sophomore year. We lived about 7 miles out of town. If you're familiar with where Christmas Mountain is, it's a ski hill in the Dells. Didn't have much for a vehicle, didn't have a phone, and in order for me to play athletics, I had to be at practices. So I ended up moving in with my uncle Sam and his family, and it was one of the better things that I probably did. I had to leave my parents and leave a younger brother, and I moved into the downtown Dells, and they took me in, just like all Native American families will do. is when a relative can't provide, or in this case, a sister, my mom couldn't provide. My Uncle Sam took me in, and I lived with them for my sophomore, junior, and senior year. And my Uncle Sam kind of stepped in as a role model and father figure. And in the Ho Chunk tribe, the uncles are the ones who kind of drop the hammer as far as behavior wise goes. So he made me toe the line and made sure that I certainly tried as hard as I could in academics, and certainly the athletics kind of came along as a natural thing. And I was able to walk to school. I was able to walk back to his house, and that was home for 3 years. I was able to walk back home and really relieved a lot of stress and pressure that I had growing up. As I mentioned, I was raised by a community, a lot of role models and mentors, elementary and junior high teachers that really took a liking to me and interest in me, and certainly some of the former athletes that I really looked up to. I idolized some of the athletes that had played with my Uncle Gary and Uncle Byron, and some of the older athletes, and they really took a liking to me. They saw something in me. I don't know what it was. Probably the fact that I really looked up to them. And then they would talk to me about what I needed to do, and I listened. I was a good listener, and whatever they told me, I tried to do as best I could. And like I said, I love school and athletics and my teachers. My high school years, again, I mentioned my mom's name. My mom passed away in 1997. Her name was Decora. My mom, wish she was still here, had that quote of your high school years are your best days of your life. And again, I would 100% agree with that. Really, it wasn't really necessarily the teachers and coaches either. It was the office staff people, the secretaries that were in the office, the custodians. Since I spent a lot of my time, and I failed to mention this earlier, but I spent a lot of time with my great uncle. His name was Reuben Thundercloud. He passed away in 1997 as well. And I spent a great deal of time with him growing up, probably from 4 and 5 years old all the way up to 11 or 12 years old. So I spent a lot of time with him, which I think it made it easy for me to get along with adults, teachers, coaches, office staff, custodians. I probably really enjoyed the adults more than I actually enjoyed my friends growing up. I was involved in athletics. Like I said, I played football. My teammates are my best friends to this day. They were like family. My the basketball team I played with, again, I spent most of my time with my teammates. We would do a lot of things outside of basketball. Spent a lot of time hanging out in school, hanging out after school on the weekends. I want to draw a little attention to the middle picture. That is me as a sophomore. I'm not quite built like that anymore. Probably a few pounds heavier. But the gentleman in front of me was my head football coach, and his name was Fred Cool. Coach Cool. It wasn't COOL, but it was KUHL. He was from Lake Mills. He was a drill sergeant in the Army, and for being as tough as he was on us, I became a Phi Ed teacher really because of Coach Cool. Again, he was a mentor to me. He was my coach, but he'd also call me into his office, and we would just talk about stuff. Hey, how's it going with your parents? And I think he knew that I had a little bit of a tough home life, and he'd ask my parents, do you have a ride home? You're going to be able to get to practices on time. And really, he spent a great deal of time with me. So when I decided to become a Phi Ed teacher, he was one of the main reasons. There I am, far right-hand corner playing. We made it to the state championship game my senior year. So it was really, again, a cool thing. And it's something that the town of Wisconsin Dells still talks about to this day. And again, like I said, I've got great relationships from that, not only with obviously the teammates, but certainly townspeople that I run into on kind of a not as regular basis as I like to. But when I get back to the Dells, it's really cool to see people that were around that at that time. Tommy Bartlett's Geese Guy and Stage Show. Got the little Tommy Bartlett logo down there. Like I said, the Tom Deal family, his wife Margaret, their kids Jill and Jeff. The deals kind of took me in. They paid for some of the things that I couldn't pay for growing up. Some basketball camps they took care of. Tom Deal really always would talk about work ethic, talk about being places on time, and he was pretty demanding. But at the same time, he also could be my friend or again that father figure. And really the Tommy Bartlett Ski Show and the employees there were also like family. You'll get to see my wife here in a little bit, but that's where I met my wife, Sarah. She graduated in '86. She's a year older. She's from the Dells, and she always talks about me being this arrogant athlete when I was just a quiet guy and really kind of kept to myself. And I got a chance to work with her, and she really saw that I really wasn't an arrogant athlete. I was actually a pretty nice person. But working with that whole particular organization, that company, was so much fun in the summers, and a lot of those people I still again call friends. And it was just fun to work there, and it was like it really had a family atmosphere about those days. My college days, I went to UW Platteville. I only visited a couple of schools. I actually visited University of Wisconsin, and at that time, Badger football was not very good. Badger basketball was not very good. So I visited there. I wanted to go there as a student, and I had a kind of an uncle on my mom's side that was involved in some of the Native American stuff there, recruiting. And he said that we could probably get you in. And I just wasn't real thrilled about going to the UW, partly because I wanted to play. I was looking into playing sports, and they just weren't very good like they have been for the last 20, 25 years or more. So it was down to UW Stevens Point and UW Platteville. Platteville was a little closer than Stevens Point, and they had a little bit better salesman down there, Coach Christ, as I said before, and Coach Ryan. So I followed in the footsteps of my favorite people, teachers. I tried journalism the first year. Somebody didn't clue me in as to saying that you can't really be bad at English. You got to be good at English to be a journalism person. I wanted to write about sports. I wanted to get the good seats at the sporting events, but I was not very good at English. So next option was being a health teacher. Being a FIA teacher, because of the role models that I had and the FIA teachers that I had in growing up and in high school. Played on the men's basketball team and learned from, again, a Hall of Fame basketball coach. I learned about work ethic. I learned about being on time. I learned, to have your hair cut a certain way, shave, and look respectable. And play for something bigger than yourself. Play for the team, striving to be the best. He always sets some. Our coach, Bo Ryan, always sets some standards, very high standards. To this day, all of those teammates that you see in that picture down on the bottom left, I would probably call, probably 3/4 of those guys best friends, brothers, teammates for life, and could probably call on on them if something was going wrong, and they'd be at my front door. So I really look at those guys not only as teammates but family, and certainly the coaches. And you can take a look in the far right. That was taken 2 years ago. That's my wife Sarah in the middle. That's Kelly Ryan right next to my wife, and that's Coach Ryan. We met him for dinner at Cafe Hollander, and we just had a great time visiting with Coach. And like I said, that picture was in 2019, and I played until 1991. So what is that? 28 years later, we can still meet and go out and talk like it's coach and player, but it's more of probably really good friends now, family. Why is my journey so important? I wanted to talk about, and I want to end kind of here shortly, is that being a role model in a young person's life is golden. I've been able to do that and live that in my 29 years of teaching, and I'm not sure where else I would be. I know if I were a journalist, I probably wouldn't play as large a role as I do now with my students, former students, etc. But if you have that ability and your job allows you to be a role model to somebody younger, do it, because it's a very, very rewarding what I do. And I try to get involved and get to know students, get to know my students, and play some kind of positive role in their life, encourage them, try to talk about having them do new things. And then certainly seniors that are going to be leaving here in a couple of weeks. I tell my homeroom seniors every year that if you ever need anything from me, whatever that happens to me, call me. I will help you in whatever way, shape or form that I can do, just because I get a thrill out of that. All young people need role models, especially ones that come from a life that I had, where not very much money, economically challenged, minority student, didn't have a role model in terms of really a father figure. I had a lot of father figures, matter of fact. But again, especially children and students of color who might need some help. And as I stated before, underprivileged kids, kids who are special needs students. Young people need role models in their lives, more than just their parents. Teachers can fill that role, but you don't have to be a teacher to fill that role. You can just take an interest in a young person's life. And again, I wouldn't have these pictures that I have posted here. If you look to the far left, or excuse me, the far right, that's at the Marigold down, I think, on the Capitol Square. Starting from my left is my daughter, Emily. She just turned 30 last week. And it's hard to believe that I have a child that is 30. I had some people, some friends of mine at school said, "Hey, Tim, you look closer to 30 than having a 30-year-old." So I don't know if they were trying to make me feel good or were joking around, but I took it as a compliment. To her, right next to her is my son, Sam. He graduated from the University of Wisconsin last spring. I couldn't be more prouder of him, 22 years old. Let me go back. My daughter graduated from University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and has a really, really sweet job with Summit. I just got a son back. So right at smack dab in the middle is my son, Will. He's 26. He also graduated from the UW. So we just got him and his fiance, Samantha, back from Denver. He had worked out there with a software company, and he moved back from Denver. My son, Sam, took a job out in Denver. So at some point he's going to be going out there. So if you need some advice on what to do in Denver, those two will have it. And again, that's my awesome wife, Sarah, right next to myself. The next picture is my sister-in-law, Molly, in the white dress, got married. Believe that one again is 2 years old, and that's kind of all my inner circle. Got my son, Sam, my mother-in-law, Mary Alice. Again, you see Sarah there, Molly's husband, Tom. And then right next to my daughter, Emily, is Samantha Murray. She's my son, Will's fiance. She is awesome. Love her to death. And then right behind my daughter, Emily, is Jacob. That's her significant other. Those are really my tight-knit family. Two pictures I put down here in the bottom left-hand corner. The first one is my 51st birthday. I bought myself and my wife some really good Bucks tickets, and we went down, and that's the picture right before the pandemic started. I believe it's February 22nd or 23rd. And we went to the Bucks game. And then the picture of the North Side Farmers Market, which we go to a lot, was taken, I believe, in June. And of course, that's where we started to mask up and kind of in the thick of the pandemic. Okay. So what am I doing now? I will finish my 29th year. And by the way, I'm almost done. 3 years in Hillsborough, like I said, awesome school district, awesome community, awesome kids, awesome teachers. Been in Wanakee for 26 years. And like I said, I couldn't be happier. I couldn't have landed in a better place. This community, the colleagues that I work with, the superintendents and principals that I've had an opportunity to work for, just great people. Mr. Kirsten, the guy that hired me, was with me for 24 of those 26 years, and I couldn't have asked for a better principal to work for. Mr. Borowski, who took over for Mr. Kirsten, again, I'm older than him, I believe, by a year, so that's kind of odd. But he is they handed the baton to a guy that just had picked it up and ran with it. Gene Homley was the superintendent here. He hired me. We had Chuck Purcell, and then for the last few years now, we've had Mr. Gutenberg, who I think I'm either the same age or maybe a year older than him, has been outstanding with things dealing with not only our school. He's an outstanding superintendent, but I've been working with him for probably the last couple of months here intensely on some things dealing with Ho-Chunk things, which I'll touch on real briefly here shortly. Part of the Village of Wanakee and Town of Westport Sesquicentennial Committee, which is honoring the Ho-Chunk Nation. Tom Wilson, who's I believe on the call here tonight, and Chris Zellner invited me to be on this committee, and they really did it right. They wanted to honor the Ho-Chunk Nation as a part of their July 4th Wannaboom celebration because the Ho-Chunk people were here before Wanakee became Wanakee. They're partnering with the Nelson Institute at the UW, who's led by Jesse Conaway. Jesse has been awesome in terms of, this is not her first rodeo doing things with the Ho-Chunk tribe and different communities, but she stepped right in, and I think she's been a great leader, and it's been a privilege to work with her and the students in the Nelson Institute, and under her guidance, the students have been awesome to work with. Matter of fact, one of the students is a former student, Carson McFarland, so it was really good to see him and kind of talk with him and catch up with him a little bit. But some of these projects that are centering on the Ho-Chunk people and the importance that we played in the area is going to be on display July 4th and afterward. So they've been awesome to work with, and I can't thank Chris Elner and Tom Wilson for asking me to be a part of this, because it's been a great partnership. I'm also, number 3, part of the rebranding process that's going to be taking place in the school district of Wanakee. Our goal is to hopefully build a relationship with the Ho-Chunk Nation. I'm going to be meeting with the Prez, Marlon White Eagle, sometime next week, I hope. And we want to, again, we're one of the top 1 or 2 community school districts in the Dane County area, and I think it would be great for the Ho-Chunk Nation to partner in whatever it happens to be with the school district of Wanakee. Couldn't ask for a better school district, and that relationship is going to be built on respect and hopefully some mutual support from the Ho-Chunk Nation, and to get some kind of public declaration out of them for the support and the work that we're doing with the things that we have going on. Also, I've in the last couple months, I've got to work on the Act 31. Act 31 is a state statute requiring public school districts to provide instruction on history, culture, traditions, the tribal of the nation. Of the tribes, the federally recognized American Indian nations and tribal communities, to provide instruction, professional development for communities, and about Ho-Chunk and about the other different tribes that we have And in particular, like I said, for us, Ho-Chunk, because we kind of dominate the south central part of the state. And you can't watch too many TV programs on some of the local channels without seeing Ho-Chunk Gaming, Ho-Chunk Madison, Ho-Chunk Bingo and Casino in Baraboo. You watch a Badger basketball game, all you can see is Ho-Chunk Gaming scrolling through on the scoreboards. So it's really cool to see. Those are some of the things that I haven't really been involved very much with the Ho-Chunk tribe and doing work for them, but I'm doing some other things that I think will not only benefit them, but hopefully other tribes in the state. So I'm going to close. Best way to start the conversation with me, if you have any questions or comments, you can reach me via email. There's my school address. I kind of consider this a little bit of schoolwork as well as community and village work. Best way to get a hold of me is at timdecora@wanakee.k12.wi.us. I'm a little old school, so I probably won't get too much involved in an email conversation with you, but I will probably call you back because I'm more of a talker than a typer. And I just like to talk to people and get to know people and where they're from. So I'm going to stop the share there. I want to thank Megan. I want to thank Courtney at the library. I want to thank who else do I need to thank? I want to thank the Nelson Institute for giving me this opportunity and asking me to speak tonight about a little bit about who I am. If you know me by name, hopefully you know me a little bit better now as far as my background goes. And I just want to say thank you for the people that organize this. Oh yeah, there you are, Megan. Megan as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Decora. It was a pleasure hearing what you had to share with us. Next up, we are going to be hearing from Mr. Bill Quackenbush and Miss Mandy Depagter.
Yes, good afternoon or evening, I guess it is, everyone. Yeah, I was just blown away by your story. I mentioned in the chat, that I'm always amazed at sitting down and taking time to learn about, or at least hear about someone in depth, their story, and no different than what you told tonight. It's amazing what you can find out of the roads and the pathways that people take through the year. And I appreciate that you'd presented in the way you did. You learn so much from childhood on, and how you change in your roles as a child and a teenager and adolescent up to the young adult life, and now to your elderly age of what, 30? Is it, Tim? It's something amazing to hear about all the experiences. Oh, yeah. I saw 39. That's all I can count up to. So, but that said, thank you, folks, for taking the time to stay online a bit longer. I'm going to try to share my screen now. I think she gave us the ability to do that. Amanda Depagter on here is going to present with the aid of a PowerPoint presentation on here to have some slides in order to keep us on track, for example. Can everybody see our screen? It should be a full screen.
Yep.
Okay, sounds really good. And Amanda, at this time, if you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the history of how we got to Madison, and you took a roundabout way over to California and back.
Sure. Yeah. So leading up to the introduction of Bill and myself, I'm 45 now. So I met Bill when I was at the University of Wisconsin in Patty Lowe's, one of Patty Lowe's courses about the nations of Wisconsin. And it was such an important course for me because after I graduated from high school in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, I traveled to California, and eventually one thing led to another there. And I was a Park Service employee. I built trails and bridges for the Park Service in Yosemite National Park. And there was a very locally cultural relevant to some extent. Some would probably argue that it was more of a museum type of effort, but there was a a Miwok village in Yosemite Valley. And so I was exposed to local culture, worked alongside local tribal members. And, one thing again led to another. I met my husband and we had our son. And when he was 2, we made the decision to move back to Wisconsin. And I realized that I had missed out on so much local history growing up in Wisconsin. I knew more about the local tribes that I had worked alongside of different tribal members in, the state of California that I hadn't grown up in. And so an opportunity to actually learn about the First Nations of Wisconsin was so important to me. And that is where I met Bill when he presented to Patty Lowe's course on sand frac mining. And I got a perspective of the Ho-Chunk cultural perspective on the land and the ways of life that was extremely important to me. And it inspired the capstone project that I worked on then in my senior year at the UW with Janet Gilmore over at the landscape architecture in the landscape architecture program. So yeah, one thing did lead to another, and Bill was so encouraging and so inspirational in his efforts to be part of this collaboration, that it just, the momentum sort of, it started with an idea and it just, it moved into a effort, and we brought lots of different personalities on board. Really my role in the project itself was just to try to get other people excited about learning about Ho-Chunk ways of life, about learning about Ho-Chunk history, about learning about Ho-Chunk perspective in today's world, and to try to bring that to as many community members as we could in, kind of just sharing the excitement that Bill brought to the project and the perspective that Bill brought to the project. So, what I did was I flagged Bill down after he was done speaking to the class. I was waiting for the bus, and I saw him on the coming out of the classroom, and I just sort of kind of ran up to him and said, I have this idea. Would you be willing to listen more, talk more about this idea? And he was willing to talk more. So it kind of started from there. I don't know, Bill, if you want to share your perspective. I think I was just kind of awkward, and I just kind of threw it out there that there was this idea that I had. It fit a project that I was working, was tasked with in Patty Lowe's class, and just sort of put the feelers out there to see if you were on board. And in my recollection, you probably thought I was crazy.
Yeah. So my side of that initial connection was in Patty's class there. I was actually kind of forced to go down to her class. March is a busy time for the field of preservation for tribes. You're trying to patch up all your winter research projects. You are now preparing to get ready for your spring projects and so on and so forth. So there's a transition process where you got two things happening at once. We were asked from a department-wise to go down there and because it was payable to see if we can give our perspective about our cultural, our viewpoints on frac sand mining. It was a very big thing back then, at this period of time in our lives around here in this region. Frac sanding was coming to this area. Well, it's just as big, if not bigger now, but we're finding that we have been now lulled into accepting these frac sands. That said, you can take a look at the date here, March 5th. As she mentioned, she kind of ran me down as I was walking out of the building there. We had been promised free parking, and the parking tickets didn't work. So I was just going to go back and try to save me some minutes and get out of there. So I think I handed Amanda a business card, and which often takes place. A lot of people I talk to, I'll give them a card, and if there's a continued interest, they will contact me. And then usually after a couple of weeks, I can't remember who it is, so I have to kind of refresh. But she sent this beautiful email right here on March 20th, a couple of weeks later there. And of all the interesting things on this email, she sent about this proposed project about utilizing a park, because it had all this, this ability to become something good or better. She sent, the obligatory, park, maps and a few, other documents of interest to us. And as I mentioned to Mandy, I said, these are probably, they were in a 3-ring binder I had. I always create a file on everything I do to perk my memory if I get asked about it, 15 years later to present for, a group like this, right? But at any rate, I highlighted a few things of interest. It looks like my pen died, but the most important things are usually higher in my process I do here. And as Mandy had mentioned to me, that those goals of objectives of to creating a good project included, these aspects of a bullet. No different than any other project plan that is proposed. You want, here's what you need to fulfill in order, I guess, to get a good grade. So, and that said, what really captured my curiosity was the fact that, and let me see if I can move that, was that, although the parkland was there, she did her due diligence and didn't find much as far as culturally on the property there. And she had made the mention that, well, that was the bad news. Good news is, of course, that the intended for, that it is intended for youth development in Mccarthy Youth and Conservation Park, right? And that, it has a diversity of, of land use that could be, kind of focused on if we were to work together to create this cultural component within this park. And this is where talking with Megan earlier tonight about archaeology and tribes viewpoint on our cultural context to an area are just two totally different things. And even though Charlie E. Brown is the godfather of anthropology and archaeology and history in Wisconsin, even he had his shortcomings in that. He based a lot of his off his European perspective on things. So with that said, this is what Mandy was mentioning, that very poor, the blue is inside of the park, basically. It's not, but it's close. Not much as far as cultural context, as far as an archaeologist goes concerns. But as I mentioned to Mandy, this yellow down here in the far corner and these two large yellow blobs up here are archaeological sites. The more prominent and more interesting was this one down here, where the interstate comes through. There's a large, burial site complex there that included effigy mounds and other forms of earthworks. And in between that and where you would stay to create that mortuary or burial system would be a large village complex here. The park just happens to be right in between it. There has been a lot of soil disturbance there taking place because it was also a gravel pit of sorts or a mining area there. But that said, I was curious, very interested to see what the park actually looked like, because I had been by it in the past and I'd never gotten past this gate right here. And it was very formidable. There's a metal gate in front, big signs of warnings, do this and do that. And there's a chungade or a toilet there. And there's much this park from the roadside. But once you get past that gate and you get up over the crest of that little knoll there, that park opens up, and then you start seeing the true value of that park. And I fast realized what Mandy was talking about, that this park has a lot of potential in it. See if we could develop something that was culturally as an educational tool. So our first meeting on site, and Mandy, I mentioned to you that when I go and visit people for the first time, I like to get there a few minutes early, just to calm down my thoughts, and start focusing on what we're talking about. And if you know that park at all, to the rear of this medicine wheel that was put in here by, was it a Boy Scout group, Mandy, I believe, or maybe
it was a Eagle Scout project, I believe. It was definitely a troop member that put that together and created that.
And it's still there to this day. And what I thought was interesting is that it was a standalone, project. And I think if you're Eagle Scout, you're working towards getting, recognize that you could become a leader and you can run groups, and this is what they organized, this is what they created. But from that point on, there's nothing else in the park. And this park goes along this road after the gate and goes all the way back to that knoll in there where you see that tree. That was that green area in that archaeological map. So I was interested on what they had here. Mandy had showed up, I think, with was her name Karen? Is that her from the Friends group?
Yeah, I would have brought Karen. So around the same time, at the same time that I, had suggested the idea and you were interested in it, I started attending the Friends meetings for McCarthy Park because I knew that in order to gain any traction, there had to be an interest from the Friends group. So Karen is and was the Friends president at the time and still is, and she showed interest in the project, and she's been at the park for many of the events that the collaborative events that have happened over the years. So yeah, I believe it was you and I and Karen at that initial site visit.
Yeah. And through our walkthrough there, we found a lot of historic contacts of the old farmland. And what really caught my eye though too, she had that 3-inch folder there full of documents and notes ready to go. So through our walkthrough though, we noticed that, although that's a marsh out there and that it looked pretty great in the month of March, there's a lot of interesting, items there, context that culturally is very significant to Indigenous peoples. And one of them was this small group of cottonwood there. And in talking with most forestry groups, there would be no value hardly to that at all. In fact, they almost become a nuisance, and they're just kind of like the box elder, right? But to us, cottonwood has a historic significance to us that we talk about, that we hold fond memories of. And so that plays a role later on. But in short, when Mandy and I had met on site on here, I was very encouraged by seeing the diversity of not only wetlands and the marsh areas and riparian areas, the stream itself that's to the east side, as well as this knoll area that we had talked about a little bit about establishing maybe, an educational unit on top of that. And so far, at this point on here, I was pretty encouraged by the diversity of use of the plants and the terrain. Do you want to talk about this, Mandy, right through here now?
Yeah, we're on the next site. Did you want me to talk about the landscape narrative or move on to this next?
Well, yeah, if you want to talk, about this area here, how you adjust the plan to break and load, and some of the things that you thought about the cost analysis of how we could keep it to a minimum, use existing trails and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so out at the park, there was what I thought was a kind of a blank canvas for this type of project. And what Bill saw was it had all of the relevant features that would be required to really depict and to enhance some cultural learning experiences for the community to come out and learn about historic ways of Ho-Chunk living. And so the wetlands area certainly provided opportunity to talk about, the cottonwood trees and dugout canoes and utilizing, resources that maybe if ecologists in the School of Landscape Architecture at the UW see certain species, willow, cottonwoods as invasive species. There's use for those types of plants, and there is value in those plants. And so the park provided in all the different, the creek, the wetlands area, the drumlin, the knoll, and then this is a prairie that would be where we are standing, Bill. I believe if you look in the background would be where the demonstration garden site is now in the greener picture. In this picture here, there is where Bill and I are standing. There is an overlook that was designed by the park planner through these conversations. And so there's some boulder seating here so that you can look over this landscape, and it's a perfect platform to talk about the way that the land has changed, and also the ways in which the land has stayed very much the same, and the resources are still very much as important. So that's in this picture here, that's kind of the overlook, and it's also an area provides seating for talking about the landscape. So this
what I was just going to say is that is where we ended up there on that knoll there, providing a beautiful soundscape view in order to bring groups of their interest there to talk a little bit about the diversity of that park, which is something that comes into a key role later. And then, so Mandy, I have this group here, picture of the Friends of the Park, and Janice is on here, or Janet is on here. And some other key players there that we had sought approval to go forward with this concept, this node concept of educational sites in the park. And Amanda's right in the middle, right there. You don't see her because she's kind of petite, but she always shows up, at everything that happens at this park here when it comes to educational outings on here. So when we talked about that concept, that she had decided that concept 3 from her choices of her proposed plan there, it involved the park having these no less than 9 different stops or nodes there where you would have the ability to talk a little bit about something significant that's within that park area that also fit well on talking about, traditional cultural indigenous life, that concept would have been able to take place there. Included with this, it has now been refined down to 4 distinct sites there, but there's still 9 places where you can stop on this educational tour to talk about the significance of each site. And so she had created these 9 nodes here, Mandy did, and the titles of them is probably all we really have time to go through. But the Woodland Ways gathering area, if you look back on that map, for example, when we walked through there initially with Chris James and the group there, that area right there was very interesting because as you walked into that tree area there, the temperature dropped, 4 or 5 degrees. You had the brook upstream coming through there, Koshkonong coming through there. And it gave you a bit different perspective of them walking across the Oakland Savanna up here in the prairies and the restoration that doing up here. And it was a great opportunity to talk a little bit about life and how if you created a little small village area on here. And you got to remember, right across that river over in this area over here, there's a high proponent of old village archaeological sites. You got to remember that this was actually used here as that. And so it would have been a great opportunity to talk about life of old in this area. as she talked about creating these knolls at riparian area, there's a fish weir that we're talking about over in the Lake River, the Yahara River right now, and how the county and Dane wants to do some dredging and there's this fish weir that they're concerned about and the adverse effects that could cause there by dredging the center of the Yahara River, a 50-foot wide gap in it. But these are They do hold cultural context to them. They don't make fish weirs anymore. Nobody really makes fish weirs anymore, or are we allowed to legally? And so as you destroy these, unique items on here, they become less and less, throughout the region on here. But in that lake, that Quackenbush River over there, there's remnants of stones in there and everything. It would be a great opportunity for our children to learn a little bit of how the fishing techniques have changed through the years. And then other nodes that she had created was the concept of a spring camp. We'll go into these later, and the spring camp though has been something of a hit and miss process right now, whereas we're learning a lot. That even though we want something in the worst way into an area, sometimes our grandmother the earth just doesn't allow it to happen. And so we'll talk a little bit about more of that, of course. And then this node here, and the several nodes that we talk about or create here throughout the process on here, well, all 9 of them are encapsulated within her process of developing the plan here. I can't really see them up there with this line that's in the way up here right now. But so as we go through the nodes now, we're going to be talking about once they were accepted by everybody and everybody was on board on there, and this meant, Mandy's project was given basically the green light by the Friends, and the Ho-Chunk Nation has agreed to assist in the matter of creating these educational components. And the city of Dane, or the county of Dane, was totally on board with that happening at this park on here, as well as now. What is Janet's official title? Is she a university professor?
Yes, yeah, Janet is a professor within, she's a emeritus now. She's a retired professor. She worked within the landscape architecture program as a folklore professor.
Oh, yes, yes. Oh, that's right. You'll see her in the background on much of these pictures on here. And about a year ago, I didn't realize how much of a role she had played in the background on here. And we were invited to listen to one of her presentations here a couple months ago for the Mount Horeb Historical Society. She talked about her efforts and all the things that she had talked about, and she included the endearing processes that had taken place at McCarthy Youth and Conservation Park. And it really struck me and made me rekindle an interest in what all you can collaboratively do together on a no dollar strings budget, basically. And I should take that back. Even though hardly any money is spent on this educational component, there's a lot of manpower and the gifting of time and effort in it too. So there is some value to that process. But at the end, what we gain out of it as a tribe is exponentially amazing for our tribal youth, our tribal family members, and so on and so forth. And I utilize that park day in, well, I shouldn't say day in, day out, pretty regularly when I go down to the Madison area, because I refer to it quite often of the efforts that we have put in there. And tribal members still are amazed that we have this ability to go to that park and actually utilize the site. So, and yeah, so I put on here real quickly, who's going to be doing all this work? Well, it comes to find out everybody initially enjoys chipping in, and that is just the case. So our first attempts of creating a better educational site there, and Mandy will fully attest that ground was a booger to till up, and but we got it. It took us some time. Right here, we're working with some of the youth on here. Intermixed with all these young people is Janet right there. We have Mandy's better half. He's standing back in there, and her children are here. I actually even have my wife and one of my daughters back there sitting there too. So it was kind of like a multi-family affair out here, creating the first raised garden bed. And the raised garden bed is a very effective tool of education to talk about how life has transformed through the thousands of years right in little old Madison, Wisconsin. Raised garden beds and the use of agriculture had made Ho-Chunk people very prominent, throughout the region on here from the advancement of our diet. And as you can see, we chisel the site out of the brush basically there, right along one side of their walking trails, their multi-purpose trails there. There's a sign right here showing them how to go on a corner type thing there. And we had assured everybody, I think in short, that we were going to be very non-obtrusive and that these educational components will teach themselves. They'll be able to educate people on their own. And so how we did that was, there's Janet again, and getting down and dirty in there. So the raised garden bed was placed in there, and I have to thank Mandy for this. She takes care of that garden 99% of the time out there. Knock, stock, and barrel. In fact, we were talking shop just before we come on here, and everything looks like it's kind of for a goal here too again. Mandy, if you want to talk a little bit about the multi educational processes with school groups, these stones serve that purpose right here.
Yeah, so as Bill's mentioned, it's not been a high dollar effort, but there is, you know, a continual community labor and a contribution effort. And so the Prairie Phoenix Academy had expressed interest in also participating in some of the site development. And so one of the projects that they worked on is, Bill, you actually provided these stones for the Prairie Phoenix Academy students, and they took them back to their classroom, and they learned the Ho-Chunk words for different garden plants, and they painted them on the rocks, and those became the plant markers, so that anyone who walks by would see these stones placed. You know, we placed them up on stumps so that they wouldn't be direct on the ground, and anyone who walked by would see those depictions of corn, beans, garden, different you know, aspects of the garden written in both English and in Ho-Chunk.
Yeah, and as Amanda mentioned, the cost was insignificant, of course. These are field stones that were piled up on the corner of one of the fields there that we just selected 4 or 5 of the river stones, or glacier stones, actually what they are. And I took them back and hosed them off there and brought them back and dried. And they disappeared with this school group, and they brought them back painted. And it's a nice, cost-effective way of students becoming involved in a small project. And Tim, if you keep in mind students in the village of Wanakee and some of the small projects that often are not followed through on because of the cost inhibitants. There's many opportunities that you can find if you joint or collaboratively work with small friends groups and with the local parks and so on and so forth. And here's my daughter. Her name is Mackenzie. She's holding, you know, a gourd at the end of the year from the fruits of the labor. She just walked by. She just got off work, and she's right over there off the screen here. And she just chuckled at me, but that is her. And the garden there produces amazingly a lot of product there. And I don't think I have another picture immediately off there, but I just got tons of pictures on that I archive away, showing all the vegetables and items coming off that garden every year. And the reason why it's so important is that tribal members now look forward to gathering some of these things. In the squash off there two falls ago, I took it back and I actually harvested and dried and the squash to hold them over the winter. They're put in stews and soups over there, and it worked out very well because why not, right? Why not use the materials that we're using for educational purposes? And this happens quite a lot. People like to learn about people learning, and this was one example of somebody videoing. You know, Emily Schrader, for example. This is a school group of 3rd graders that she created that book. We talked about that a little bit last week, but through the years, other people have come here and reporters and such. And Mandy's pretty adept at dealing with the PR for this park right on here, which I really enjoy. So, but that said, there's those stones. You know, the garden growing up on here. Mandy spends her times in the evenings. I think she's probably fed enough blood to the mosquitoes through the years of this park on here. That's one of the things we got to worry about. But the summer lodge up on top, you know, this is one thing, Tim, we look forward to doing. Ryan Greendeer and I rode around for the village of Wanakee, and we picked 2 or 3 different locations where we would just love to come in and put up an educational Chapotake or a lodge there for your use, for your students' youth, for educational groups, even for the city there to go there and just kick the tire on something that's a little unique and different, and yet it still is very educational use. And some of the pictures here is Jim Blackdeer and myself went there, and we assisted in putting in the lodge poles. And as they went up there, we built a fire in the center. No better time to build a lodge than in the winter when the ground's frozen, and it works really well. And in short order, we put the covers on, and we're working with some of the friends there. And of course, there's Karen, is it? I keep forgetting your name, Karen. But anyway, she's there to enjoy, the fruits of the labor as well, too. And now we had a roof over our head there. We throw a little fire in there and some straw on the ground or hay. We can talk shop. And this is what Mandy was working on with her plan on here and how to develop, this plan. So in short, there is the Chapotake in the back. And here's a couple of beaming faces right on here to show that the job was well done. Spring camp area, we talked about that, how it was a learning process. You needed an entrance into it. And the entrance into there, we had to hack it out of there. So we just built a real quick frame over the top of it so people knew that where to go and entrance. And we mowed a trail over to the other side of this, to the other field over here. And all our motives were to try to create an educational site of a spring sugar bush or a maple tapping area here. But the problem is we have no maple in that area. But
Well, I'm laughing a little bit because I remember this day with the Prairie Phoenix Academy students, and that the lodge poles for this structure was willow that they had actually harvested from within the park. And so they each had a little hatchet. And I remember the look on the instructor's face when they were handed their hatchets, and nobody got hurt. They were all wonderfully respectful of each other.
We went to that storytelling area. We talked a little bit about what we're going to do. We're going to walk over to that marsh, cut some straight willow out of the marsh area over there, and bring them back. And this is on the other side of the park. And sure enough, they're all willing to do it because they all gained a hatchet in their hand. And so we had to do a little housekeeping, tell them they're sharp, got to be careful and safe. Learned how to carry them properly. Hoofed on down there, and there was people that were more than willing to. We're wearing jackets, and this guy is barefooted, and they go down in that marsh and cut some of those maple saplings, bring them back over here, and build this little structure because it's a little hands-on. The kids really got into it, and people use this quite a lot, And I'll go through these real quickly here, but in short, we planted some maples. Somebody donated some maples, was it, Mandy? They donated 20-some trees. The youth group from the whole chunk come here, and we stuck them in the ground. Very few of them lived. I think they were a little dried out. They might be too wet in here. But anyway, in short, it was the effort that counted. I had so many pictures of the students really working hard. Each one of them got a shovel. I think Mandy even donated so many shovels for a couple of weeks. We left them there, and she finally picked her shovels back up. But at any rate, and this lady, what's her name, Amanda?
That is Rhea Stengelmeyer, and for many years she was the Parks Volunteer Coordinator. And so she was between Rhea and Chris James. Those were the links between the Friends Group and the Dane County Parks, deciding that this was a great collaboration with Bill and the Ho-Chunk Nation to do this. So there were a few key players that continued really being enthusiastic about the effort. And Rhea was one that she deals with a lot of different volunteer groups. And so she was hesitant at first about bringing in another idea and another type of interest, but she did warm up, and she helped to coordinate with some of the community events that were held in the Chapotake for the winter event and the youth service days. And so she did bring members of the community to the educational sites.
Yes. And it should be noted, this is right on a trail. around the corner up there was where that fish weir discussion would have taken place right about here, right around the corner into the wooded area would have been that first note up there talking about a woodland type setup. They come around this trail here. This is all prairie restoration taking place. I think the park burns that, and when they have the ability to burn it off on there. But there's many plants out there and other aspects that's conducive for the oak savanna type prairie that's out there. So that said, like I said, we had to hack our way in, and several times they took staff there, and we took mowers and brush hogs in there and helped clean up. Amanda was falling right behind, picking up limbs constantly on a lot of this work here. But that said, I didn't get the picture in here. Maybe I will later. They went back and they cleared all that out. They're cleaning the stream up, and that stream, they knocked all that stuff out of there, and it's just open area now. And so, but so we'll start again. And that's all there is to it. And I think it was Chris James and the friends there. They had said that they had found some maple, probably up on that knoll a little bit, probably by that big tree that you and were standing by initially on our initial walkthrough. But that's perfectly fine. It doesn't matter. We'll get something going there to show the spring concept, because a spring village area is so important to cultural life, because that's when you start doing your sugar bushing, you're catching your spring fish, and there's so many stories that are taken, and your spring feasts are going on. It's an important story to talk about. All 4 seasons are, and spring holds an important role in our history. So, Amanda, you want to talk about this right here now and how that came to be?
Yeah, so that's the overlook for the landscape narrative site, which is that wetland that we were overlooking earlier. And so that actually was the design and product of Chris James. And so once he became a fan of the idea at McCarthy Park, even though there were not archaeologically relevant historical documentation of the site, and this was now something that was organically being produced by the Ho-Chunk Nation and the community. He actually brought in a mason to place these boulders and provide a seating area for storytelling, overlooking the landscape.
Yeah, right on. I mean, that was a pleasant surprise. I came back one time and I saw it. It was all, it's a little, it needs to be mowed and picked yet. It was early in the spring here. In the back there, you'll see this little telltale sign of some better things to come. This pole here was where this little library was fastened to. In fact, I just pulled in there. In fact, is that my new? Yeah, right. I did this here not too long ago, and I was taking it back to repair it. In fact, I'm gonna take a picture. They are standing in that area. The stones are behind us here, and they're talking about this concept of having this as a nice area to congregate and talk a little bit about the park as a whole. There's so much information that you can talk about in this area here. And I got to tell you, if you go out there in the evening and you watch the stars rise behind this backpack and off to your right on here, that North Star and the Big Dipper and Small Dippers and all those other ones that surround it, they're so beautiful in this area here because there is a easier opportunity to see because there's not very many lights around here. So I think if the park doesn't, they should concentrate on working on have that, what do they call it, the no light concept in place on the county parks. If they haven't did it already, that'd be a great endeavor to work on. All right there. And that's going to come up in a second too. So that storybook telling this again, last week, if you've listened in, Emily put on a perfect presentation about one of the books in there is something that she had created as a multilingual storybook that included in Spanish, the Ho-Chunk, English in it, and the 4th type of story that it told. There's 4 types of language in there. One was a pictorial storytelling in there. So there's 4 different languages in that little book that she had created. Here's the kids. Now, Mandy, who made this? Who made the library, and how did they get to paint it here?
So yeah, that was the Prairie Phoenix Academy actually was working on a little library project, and they had offered the suggestion of donating a little library for the park, and Emily expanded on that idea. And it was, I believe the idea came up when we one spring day were probably sitting around a picnic table talking about how to provide opportunities, upcoming opportunities. And so Prairie Phoenix Academy students made the little library. It was transferred to Emily Schrader's class, and they then did the painting and the stenciling of the little library. And then it was installed there was a group, Emily and the Prairie Phoenix Academy were both involved in installing the little library on site.
Yeah, right. I mean, I know I sort of bought some books offline, some coaching authors. I think I put one of the people, big boys book in there. Quite a few different software other books on there too. And slowly they were there, but they're really truly made for people who enjoy them to that degree. They might just as well take them. I mean, because that's what they're for. They're to use, right? And so, in short, I got to get that door back on and get that books freshened up, get that back on there. That'll be one of my next spring projects that's taking place there. Back to those trees, though, sitting on those rocks. And talk about the diversity of plants from the wetlands to the riparian up in here to the higher ground, the prairies on here. It's great. And every plant, they say everything on this earth that, you know, our creator has given us has a use. You just got to find out what it is. These cottonwoods tell a beautiful story about us as a people and how that saved us through the years there. We are people of the big voice, right? But we also are known by Eastern Algonquin tribes as the people of the big waters. And that we, although had birch bark and elm bark canoes, we also had dugout canoes made out of this very tree right here, the cottonwood and the white pine around here. And that has saved our butts through the years on different times when we were being removed during the historic periods. And so I wanted to tell that story on here, and we were standing there that day, and we could have talked for hours on that, but I was going to stay with it for the other day. So that said, that comes up again. But the key to all of this, why it was so important for me at least to participate and talk a little bit about the collaborative processes and the benefits of that. Village of Wanakee, the school district, the friends groups that throughout the village, you know, as well as the university and Nelson Institute. There are reasons, ulterior reasons and motives why I continue to do what I do. And one of them is sitting right here. This is the MOU that was created to draft by several people, including Chris Danes and myself. It is an agreement. An MOU is nothing more than an agreement to make something better that is collectively shared. This MOU basically is stating that the Ho-Chunk Nation and its tribal members will have the ability to use the park for certain things on here. This is not a binding agreement, it's just an agreement there that they're recognizing that we are working collaboratively together. Whenever there's an interest that we like to address, we have that ability to do so. And we are now working with Dane County and the parks level there to create this MOU again here, because we're also working at the Lake Farm site, for example. And so we're very interested, you know, in what Dane County, you know, has to offer for us. Because in short, as I have mentioned to other people through the years, the Ho-Chunk Nation has only 4 acres of tribal trust lands in Dane County, 4 acres. And we have other fee simple lands on here, but we don't have near enough green space or places where our tribal members can go to kick the tires on, you know, nature. And so that's why it's so important for us to work collaboratively with other groups. Village of Wanakee, create an MOU with your parks there for tribal members to come there and have doings out there once a year or 4 times a year. And I guarantee you, you'll enjoy the times. So, that said, I'm going to run through a few more. We got 2 minutes. I apologize, Mandy, if it's a fast-paced thing now. But that park, oftentimes, we have groups come there, and it's so interesting on what they take back with them. We see this all the time. I never see the end products. I often get them talk. I often talk to people for reporting, and I never get to see their end products. But that canoe, that cottonwood, here's Christopher James right here, and I was actually working with the provost or the Wisconsin idea seminar process, talking about early spring there and what to do for that year. I said, you know, I'm late. I told Chris I'd walk over there and meet him at a park there, talk about some cottonwoods he says they're cutting down and they're just going to get rid of them. Is there any use for them? I go, I want to go take a look at them. She said, well, let's go. And we jumped in the vehicle, ran over there, And they were two of the most beautiful, well, there was more. There was two of the most beautiful cottonwoods that they were going to cut in order to put this trail through here. And I said, well, man, if I had those at that park, guess what we'd do with those? I'd be making dugout canoes right at the park. And Chris Dane says, oh, I think I can make that happen. Well, lo and behold, they hauled them all the way over to that park and they dropped them off over there. And I couldn't believe that he did that, but there they are. Can you imagine what it costs to do that, right? Well, anyway, so I painted the ends real quick. I was just waiting for nature to peel the bark off themselves. I got a little squirrely here. I can't wait that long, so I started chipping away on it myself. The very next year, it fell off. But anyway, so in short, there's two dugout canoe logs looking right at you right there, right? There's one of them. I actually ended up, the drive was killing me. It's 2.5 hours every time I get in the vehicle, come down there, and then 2.5 hours back. You waste a half a day. So I decided to bring one of those logs back. Let me see where this is at. Oh, this is actually sitting right behind our main tribal office complex up in Blacker Falls at this time. I started hollowing out with a chain. I got some hand tools, and I was going to use some fire in the back, third of it back here to see how effective each of them was on here. This by far works. You know, I always tell people, tribal members, if they ever had a lawnmower or a chainsaw or whatever it is out there that we have today, you can bet your bottom dollar they'd be using it. You still don't have to throw a spear to kill a deer. You can shoot them now, right? And this was going to be a good example of that. Sorry, Mandy, but here's the picture there again. What I like to see is the collaborative efforts of groups getting together and actually just enjoying something that, you know, they didn't think was possible. And here we are, free of charge, right? Here's Emily in there teaching the game of moccasin to some of her youth in there. We read the book draft that she had in there. I think we had some of my staff there teaching the game of kasu to the young gals just around the corner here. This is a group from the Ho-Chunk Nation Gaming of Madison down there had hired this consultant group there on how to put a cultural center in at our gaming facility. And they thought it was of great interest to come here to talk a little bit about the history of our tribe in Madison. I said, well, there's no better place to do that than if you could just go out there to Mccarthy Youth and Conservation Park and we can kick the tires on some of what makes us who we are. And they thought that was so incredible to take that walk through those knolls and see the raised garden bed and complexity of life in this area that made us who we are. And they want to integrate that into their displays there in this cultural center, which is pretty cool. You know, we had at times had different outings there ourselves. I think Emily had 4 of the notes we used. They played lacrosse, they played Ho-Chunk traditional games. We talked about storytelling, showing about agriculture, how it came to this region. So here we are. I think this is what happens. You usually get there and you think hard, you know, and you come to a plan and you got to get one. I don't know who's taking the picture. I still don't know who took this picture, but somebody was important. And they should have been standing right here too, right? But this is how you get things done. You just sit there and meet someday on your own and toss around thoughts and things happen. This was one of the things that had taken place in the wintertime. We thought we'd go down there in the Chapotake. I put a wood stove in there, right? A little better than smoke in the eye. We put up, here's the interesting thing. I didn't know this, but we put a pot of chili on here and we put some hot chocolate in the stove behind us. We played moccasin. Here's Chris James. Oh, I don't know. There's a few other people in here of importance, they say. But that said, down the hill and over there by where they were doing snowshoeing and so on, the sliding hill, they were selling hot cocoa. And I think they were selling bowls of chili. And we were giving it away for free and I didn't know it. So I was kind of cutting to the profit. So I apologize if anybody is still mad at me for that, but that's just the way we are. We like to feed and drink and share drinks with people. So that said, I like to leave things on a green note. Here's both of us in here playing gardener in here too. And we're standing up, and that's how well that corn grows in that area here. And this, by the way, is traditional corn, you know, and sunflower seeds, some squash and some beans and some other plants that we could also add if we needed to in this area. But it suffices to teach people that, you know, a raised garden bed concept that made us who we are in here is still alive and well, that we have that ability to do that. So that said, here we are. A little bit over time, we apologize, you know, and I'm sure we could talk a little more about that, but in short, we wanted to get across to the group this evening that collaboration and working with different parties, there is a means to the end to that. And if just come and ask, that's what you have to do. Come and ask, and it's not going to come to you sometimes. So, is there any questions out there? I'm going to get off, stop sharing. So I'm looking at the chat over here, and is there anything on here that somebody could just speak up and say? That probably helps some too there. So I'm sure Tim Decora is chomping at the bit because I have a lot of ideas, and the Village of Wanakee has a prime the ability to see some of that stuff come to reality. There you go. We mentioned that July 4th of July concept, Tim, but there's so many other things to do in that park. I want, in the worst way, to come and put a Chipotle somewhere in one of your educational facilities or one of your schools there, and throw some canvas on there and run a series of classes through that real quickly there to talk to them about the importance of our Chipotles of old being our educational centers where our grandchildren, parents would teach our children, their ways of life. And that was very important for us in the wintertime to sit down, multi-generational, and learn, from our elders. And we need that still, and we have the ability to do that. But we have the ability to do it, but we just don't do it that way.
Hey, Bill, I dropped a couple of messages to you in the chat. I would love to have you get in touch with Todd Shuka. He is a Wanakee graduate, went to school here. His dad was driver's education teacher here. I think he would be great. He would eat this stuff up, especially with biology student kids. I think he'd do a great job. And just anything new, this would be new and up and coming, and unfortunately, but I think it would be good stuff for his programs. And he has done a lot of stuff with Schmitz Woods in the past, so he'd be definitely a real good resource. And I actually sent him a text tonight about some of this stuff. So yes, we'll cross paths somehow, some way, someday here.
Well, we'll work a little bit on creating something more definitive for it's called Wannaboom, isn't it? Coming up, and that'll come up quicker than you think. I was mentioning throwing some banners together on a trailer and hiring some of our drum groups or one of our drum groups to sit on there, and they can sing some warrior songs as they come through on the parade there. And we'll pipe it out on. They don't need a microphone, but they love to hear themselves anyway. So it's just a nice presence to hear that sound, in a village area once again, or an area there too. And it's an eye opener and it's enjoyable. If you throw the right wording that's on some banners, that's all you need to do sometimes. So, like I said, I'm going to get you to sit in a convertible on the back seat, one way or another, during that parade. So, anything else out there?
I had a question just about the location of two parks. I have never been to the parks that you mentioned, and I was looking them up. So is Jane McCarthy Park in Cottage Grove?
Yes, very much so. Yep.
And there is the other one in Sun Prairie, McCarthy Conservation Park, because I had Cottage Grove and Sun Prairie came up, so I wasn't sure which one.
Yeah, it's one of the same. Once you get off the interstate, you go underneath the interstate north, and when you get to the next loop, take a right, and it's just around the bend. You don't really see it from the interstate until you realize it's there. Then every time you go by there, you can't help but look that way, because you'll see that entrance with a sign there too. But you got to get past that front gate. Get yourself some nice walking shoes and kick the tires on that park there, and you'd really enjoy it. And if you geocache, you have a benefit. There's actually 3 geocaches on that park.
And you said that there's only 4 acres of tribal trust land in Dane County. What does it mean? What is tribal trust land versus other land? Because that just seems like such little land.
Well, you have some really impeccable good here, because I did say 4 acres. 4 acres of tribal trust land is land that is held in trust by the Bureau of Indian Affairs for the benefit of Ho-Chunk people. We don't even actually own title to that land that we have there. In fact, if we purchase land, say I bought 40 acres, the tribe buys 40 acres, and they want to put that land into trust in order to receive the benefits of land in trust. And some of the benefits are You govern your own land that way. The BIA allows us to govern it. There's no taxes on that property for perpetuality. Once you create a land use plan on there, it's pretty much set in stone on there. So there's benefits for putting land in a trust. The problem with that is that in the state of Wisconsin and then for other states, we don't have a reservation per se. We're an allotment type tribe. And so that land that is held in trust, well, we have to turn around and pay the state in lieu of taxes. And it's often said in lieu of taxes, still it's just another form of taxes. But then it gives us the ability to govern our land a little more better. Mm-hmm. Now, we were one administration away, the last administration away in Washington there, to where he could have easily with one pen wiped all our way. That's how dangerous it is relying on, as a sovereign nation or tribe, or gifting our land back to the U.S. government there to hold it in trust for us. Because it's happened in the past. It happened in 1902 or something like that. Happened in 1950, and then now it's happened to other tribes since then, where they say, well, you're so assimilated that you lost your cultural ways that we are going to wipe the slate clean. That you are now American citizens type things. They absolve them of their sovereignty, and so we always have to protect that because they say that, if you lose your culture and lose your identity, you could lose that process right there. And we just don't want to go down that road. But yeah, so 4 acres of trust land, that's where that gaming facility is and the parking area. And the rest of the land that we bought around there is fee simple. Just like anybody else, where, we pay taxes on that property that's around that. We're subject to the zoning around there. There's this need, of course, to work with the city and the county and the state, just as anybody else. So we desire to put land in a trust, but we usually do it at great cost. Mm-hmm. But great question.
Well, thank you. And just one last comment for Tim. Tim, it was really interesting, like learning about your background and how that has influenced you so much with mentoring students and athletes and students who are not athletes. Just thank you for sharing that. That was very interesting.
Right on. Host, anything else you need? I can.
Hi, Dr. Jessie Conaway here. Good evening, everybody. Just wanted to say Pina Gigi and thank you to each of our speakers and to Wanakee Library and also the students for hosting. I didn't have a question. I just wanted to say thanks and good to see everybody.
You guys all take care. I gotta get back to my normal life.
If there are no more questions, I'd like to say thank you one more time to all of our amazing speakers and to everyone for being here tonight. Have a good rest of your night, everyone. We did record the session. We can make that available to people.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. The recording will be available by early next week. So it'll be on the Wanakee Library's YouTube page, and I'll share the link with everyone in the email thread. Thanks again, guys.
Yeah, take care.